With that, thank you. I will close the work session again on House Bill 2524 and open up an information hearing on the DHS emergency rule filings from April 8th, 2019. And colleagues, the reason that we scheduled this hearing, agencies do rules, and typically when there are rules, there's notice, there's a rack, so that the public has the opportunity to weigh in on the administrative rules. Sometimes the Administrative Procedures Act recognizes that there's emergencies. There's something that has to happen right away, and therefore an agency can issue a filing of an emergency rule because the need to do that is so great that it outweighs the value of public process. So we put the April 8th rules up here because they're pretty comprehensive and expansive and don't all seem to fit within that category of emergent to operate the hotline. So we wanted to bring the department in so that we could create a forum for public input and better understand what the emergency is that kind of mean that justifies kind of skipping the public process and eliminating a bunch of rules.
Good afternoon, Co-Chair, Chair Gelser, Co-Chair Hurd, members of the committee. For the record, Director Pakseresht, Director of Developmental of Human Services. With me is Kristen Kamahag, our District Manager for Centralized Hotline. As it relates to what you just stated, Senator, I believe there was a meeting that took place in your office yesterday afternoon, and some things were clarified, and we did pull those elements of the rules that were not an emergency. Kristen is here to talk about any concerns that you have around any other rules. There was, I believe, one rule that was relating to an emergency, and she can speak about that. And there are a number of things that are listed on the agenda as far as your concerns around the things that were filed. We'd be glad to answer those.
Good afternoon, Senator Gelser, Chair Gelser, and Vice Chair Hurd, and members of the committee. I'm Kristen Kamahag, District Manager of the Oregon Child Abuse Hotline. We've been in a process of centralizing our child abuse reporting system for Oregon since 2016, and we've had a series of implementation processes to gather information, to review what it would take for our state to undertake a system change to child welfare at this magnitude. And as we recognize the need to move to a centralized system, we also recognize the why behind the centralization. Primarily was due to lack of consistency around screening decision-making, which is critical because the screening program for child welfare is the front door of the child welfare system. Any report that we receive, whether it's a police report or somebody calling the child abuse hotline, must be screened appropriately to determine whether or not that child or that family requires a response by our system. Before 2016, we had 15 child abuse hotlines from across the state and over 20 numbers to report child abuse. And we have been in this process since 2016. However, we jump-started the implementation and the initial process of transitioning 15 hotlines into one in August. And we have, over the course of the last 9 months, been working on multiple aspects of centralization, one being rules and procedures. We were in a situation where we had competing priorities between rule development, procedure development, training, coaching, transitioning of a workforce, hiring and onboarding. And unfortunately, we were in a position to not have the time necessary to file permanent rules such that centralization required. And so we moved to a temporary rule filing on April 8th as a result of the lack of ability to do it timely. We are in a situation now where we have a number of staff that are being trained and provided information around how to do the work. We have 70% new workforce to screening currently, which complicates our ability to centralize our system as intended. So it's really critical for us to have rules and procedures in place to be able to train our screeners on not only changes to centralization, but also on enhanced screening practice. Part of enhanced screening practice is the integration of the Oregon safety model, our practice model, into screening. We are not a call center. We gather information from callers. We receive information from callers, collateral contacts, law enforcement, child welfare, and criminal history to make a thorough analysis as to whether or not a child or family is served by our department. So having rules and procedures in place and then providing training and coaching to our screening staff is really critical as we move forward in this centralization process. I'll remind you, we started initial implementation of the centralized system in August, and we entered our first full implementation on April 8th. So the temporary rule filing of the rules and the procedures were really meant to coincide the work at the centralized hotline, the Oregon Child Abuse Hotline, with the work that we are hoping to train and coach our staff to and enhance screening practice.
Thank you. So could you describe, I've just kind of pulled up the transmittals and I don't see a new transmittal of what is getting pulled back. So that was kind of unclear what is staying in and what is staying out. Is it just the change to the name and the change around the 2472?
So the two changes that I'm aware that will remain in the temporary rule are specific to the three-tiered response timeline, 24-hour, 72-hour, and 10-day, to responding to reports that are assigned to the field. And then the second part is around our enhanced screening practice, specifically around information gathering from the 6 domains, which is child functioning, adult functioning, parenting practices, disciplinary practices, extent and circumstances surrounding the maltreatment. So it's really information gathering from the caller to make a accurate and sufficient screening analysis. So my understanding is those two parts of the rule will remain, and the rest will be suspended until we can move forward in the formalized rule advisory committee, which is scheduled for May 15th.
And then in that domain, there's just a section where it pulls those pieces in. It talks about those pieces. Will the parts that, for instance, prohibit someone from looking at the history or prohibit them from contacting collateral contacts before they close its screening, is that part coming out?
So that part is consistent to the former rule. So we are still contacting collateral contacts when we have insufficient information to make a screening decision, and we are still reviewing child welfare and criminal history. That part of the rule is going to be suspended to be consistent to the former, but there are similarities between the two that have very minor language discrepancies. So for the new temporary rule, that is going to be suspended, and we are going to revert back to the former until we can go through the formal review process.
So just to clarify, when you say suspended to be consistent with the prior rule, the only change in rule that would be effective right now would be adding the domains and
the timelines.
And then one of the other pieces that was in there, and it was unclear how it related to screening, had to do with removing the requirement that the court be contacted if a protective order was going to last for more than 10 days. Is that part also being removed?
That is being removed until the formal review process for permanent rule filing. Yes.
Other questions? No. And could you talk a little bit about one of the things that the filing said was that there was a desire to take things out of the rule and put them into procedure in order to have more flexibility. The concern that I have about that is twofold. One, there are some things that probably there shouldn't be flexibility about, and one would hope that a procedure and policy manual wasn't flexible, that kind of what's written there is there. And the second is that for the public or families or kids that are trying to understand what to expect of the agency, what the rules are, the ability to go through a policy and procedure manual is somewhat different than kind of going online to search the rules. As an example of that, I was reading the policy and procedure manual, because you've got the one that is updated in April, and anytime you click on a link, it takes you to a new page and takes you all the way back to page 1. So you've got to scroll all the way through. So becoming frustrated with that, I uploaded the whole thing to Office Max, and while I was here yesterday, texted my daughter and asked her to please go pick it up and just get a 3-ring binder and stick the things in. I got a text from her that said, they don't make 3-ring binders that big, Mom. And so this is what I have, and this is double-sided. So in terms of public transparency and public understanding, I don't know how somebody would be able to go through this. And when there's this many rules, to take things out like what abuse is, what timelines are, that it just seems like it takes away a lot of transparency and accountability to bury it in a 2,000-page document that is maybe not reviewed very often.
Senator Gelser, Chair Gelser, members of the committee, there's no intent on the part of the agency to hide anything in those things. The agency's big, as you said. There are lots of rules in place.
And this is only child welfare.
This is only child welfare, yes. 3,000 plus staff, and naturally, because if it relates to safety, there are lots of those things. Part of our work is to simplify things and to streamline things. At the same time, there is a rule advisory committee scheduled on the 15th, and that process allows for you, for others to participate in that, and ultimately what comes out of that is as a result of participation. And we're not going to do anything on our own. Again, these were temporary rules, and you correctly pointed out some things that did not have an emergent nature, and I think we've addressed that. And again, as we go through the permanent rulemaking process, all of those concerns and questions, both around transparency and around some of the philosophical differences that might exist, will have to be addressed.
And then are you looking inside the agency at some sort of a rules coordinator? Because it's not the first time that this issue has come back up, that there's an emergency that is filed, it's not necessarily emergent, and the information comes out. It's like this was filed on April 8th and effective April, or at least the notice went out on April 8th, that it was effective on April 8th. So is that, what will be happening so that doesn't happen again in the future? Because if someone hadn't been reading them and had a hearing, probably everything just would have moved on, everything would have just slipped into this giant black hole, and the public would no longer have easy access to understanding how our basic safety systems work.
Chair Gelser, members of the committee, I want to assure you that anything that was put in these temporary rules, again, we were under a timeline of this thing being launched, and I think you're aware of that, on April 8th. Basically, the initiating of the centralized hotline, and that was the only reason that, as Kristen indicated, they needed the couple of rules that she mentioned to basically be in compliance with the law. Now, as we move forward, again, we will go through the process. Yes, to answer your question directly, we are putting infrastructure in place as far as having a person for rules. There are other infrastructure in place to address some other deficiencies that exist in the agency, and we'd be glad to share that with you. But specifically right now, there is a recruitment that's taking place to fill that gap that currently exists in the agency.
All right, thank you very, very much. All right, with that, we will close the information hearing on the DHS emergency rule findings and open up the information hearing on the update on the out-of-state placements of children. And I think we were starting with Lilia.
Yes, thank you, Senator Gelser. Lilia Tenenty, our director of our Office of Developmental Disabilities, is going to come and clarify something based on your request around the role of ODDS in the focus committee.
Yep. Thank you, Chair Gelser, members of the committee. My name is Lilia Tenenty. I'm the director of the Office of Developmental Disability Services in the Department of Human Services. ODDS's role, our role in the context of services for all children with intellectual and developmental disabilities, is that we work with guardians. Sometimes that's parents, sometimes that's other family members, sometimes that is legal representation through child welfare to identify services and then have the guardian involved choose the services for the individual. The values of the DD system are those of community inclusion and ensuring that children and adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities live as full members in their community, and that's what our services are ultimately built to support. With that, ODDS is not a guardian, nor do we have, either through statute or Medicaid rule or regulation, in ODDS placement authority for children or adults. I wanted to come back and clarify the role of ODDS on the focus committee after the last hearing. We do have 2 staff that participate. They rotate participation. It's one is there, one is not there. Sometimes, unfortunately, neither of them can attend as part of a multidisciplinary team that works with other experts and who have experience meeting the needs of children with significant needs. They, from their perspective in the participation in the committee, they explore funding options for and supports for those youth with specialized needs. There's a discussion about the use of additional funds or focus funds, and they vote on whether or not to use the additional funding. That is their role in our participation on the focus committee. And I also want to share that we have looped back since we've got the information about the 7 children specifically with intellectual and developmental disabilities that are out of state. We have contacted the CDPs, and some of them were involved in discussions and knew the child was going to be placed out of state, and some were not. It's a bit of a mix. Moving forward, which is really what we're focused on right now, we're working with child welfare and DHS leadership to ensure there's a common understanding of the focus committee, ensuring that everyone who's participating is aware of what the discussions are and what the purpose of the participation is. We continue to collaborate with child welfare on placements for children that are in Oregon right now, identifying services and then working with them as guardians, as well as with parents and others who are guardians to access services or to identify services. And then we ultimately, obviously, will be participating in the work that's going forward in child welfare around children with intellectual and developmental disabilities who also have child welfare involvement. Glad to answer any questions.
So I think what took me aback in the hearing before was the mismatch between what was said in the hearing and discussions that you and I had had. So in the hearing, it was said ODDS kind of signed off on and approved these placements. When I talked to you, after I learned that there were kids with IDDD, that was a surprise to you. You didn't know. And in fact, it took a couple of days to find out how many kids with intellectual and developmental disabilities were placed out of state. So I just want to clarify, ODDS does not make placements, and you did not approve a placement of a child out of state in an ICFMR.
Chair Gelser, no, we do not. We don't have placement authority. We rely on parents or other guardians to make those decisions. We do, however, participate, as I described, in the focus committee and vote on additional funding when a child comes up for a discussion around additional funding.
But that's about additional funding. That's not about placement in a locked, segregated facility out of state.
Chair Gelser, that is how I would describe it from the perspective of the staff who participate in that committee from ODDS. And we'll be going forward to clarify that more clearly.
And then to be clear, because I just want to make sure that I'm not, but my perception was that you were surprised that these kids were.
Chair Gelser, your perception is correct. I was surprised when I initially heard about it. We did that's why we circled back with the CDDPs and with our kids residential team. Again, what we've identified is that there was, in some instances, there was some knowledge and awareness, in some instances not. And I think that's all part of what we'll be working on going forward.
Thank you. And then I'll follow up with Marilyn when she gets up here. But in the information that was provided today about where the IDD kids are, which is Norris, Northern Illinois Academy, Mountain Home, Red Rock, and Mill Creek, which are a combination of some that have the most concerning licensing histories and processes. One of the kids has been in an ICFMR, which was just devastating and heartbreaking to me, since that's a commitment that Oregon made 2 decades ago, that we don't do ICFMRs. And I've listened to prior DHS directors in other states talk with pride about how we not only don't have ICFMRs in Oregon, we don't send children. Sorry, I was just looking to see if Marilyn was listening to the discussion. But we don't send children to ICFMRs out of state. People have stated that proudly in other places. But we have 2 kids in an ICFMR today, a 15-year-old that we placed there just last month after the whole discussion about out-of-state started, which feels like a particular betrayal, and a 17-and-a-half-year-old that has been in an ICFMR on a website that refers to it as mental retardation for 1 year, 7 months, and 9 days. And that individual is 17 and a half. The program stopped serving people at 18. What is going to happen to that individual, and what is child welfare's responsibility? Is child welfare just going to let that child age out in Arkansas and send them off in Arkansas to wander around? Or the result of a child welfare decision means that the CDDP, in this case, Clatsop County, is responsible to develop a community-based placement for a kid that has been institutionalized for 1 year, 7 months, and 9 days?
Senator Gelser, members of the committee, I don't think Lilia can answer that question, so I will. Our focus is to find the best placement. And
Fair Board, you have to say your name for the record.
Director Pakseresht, Director of Developmental Human Services. Sorry, I didn't realize that you closed the previous hearing and opened the new one. Thank you for the reminder. Our focus is on the child, and our focus is to provide the best placement for the child. As we are speaking, our licensing professionals are visiting facilities, and the IDD facilities are of most immediate concerns. We will report back to you on what we find. We will absolutely put an eye on the child, and when he gets to a place, again, I don't want to talk about the specific child here, but for any child that we're serving in these facilities, particularly the IDD population, our children that we have, we will find we are on a path to create a plan to serve all of these children in Oregon, whether it is through the CDDP or through some other appropriate placement, be it a foster home placement for IDD or some other environment where that child can actually be appropriately served. We will do that.
And I think maybe you didn't hear the question. This particular individual is 17 and a half years old. This ICFMR, which I would argue is never an appropriate placement for an Oregon child. We don't institutionalize people in Oregon, Fair Boards. We don't. I mean, are you arguing that an ICFMR is an appropriate placement for an Oregon child?
Senator Gelser, members of the committee, I would be the last one to argue with you. No, I'm not arguing with you. What I'm simply saying is there may be some misconception about how facilities are licensed in different states. So we will look into that and see if that facility actually classifies as an institution. We also will look into
it does. That's a federal definition.
Again, I'll get back to you with whatever we find out. And I also want to find out what was the reason behind where that child was placed in that facility. I think we will bring that to your attention, and then we will decide on what to do with that child. Again, Lilia is also involved in assessing the needs of these children, and we are working very closely with her and with our local providers to see if we can find appropriate placements in Oregon for that child.
Chair Gelser, I feel that if it's I feel the need at this point. The list of 7 children that we sent you earlier today, there were, as you identified, some incorrect dates in different columns, and this is what happens when people try to create a spreadsheet and then simplify it to send forward. I do think, and I'll verify this, I actually do think, just in the context of this particular discussion, in terms of the 7 children who have IDD, I do think there is actually only one in the facility you've mentioned. And I know you've got a list that maybe has another one there, the one you mentioned, and I think the one that was placed in March, on March 5th of 2019, actually is at a different facility, but I'll verify that and we will get back to you very quickly.
But the 17-and-a-half-year-old, is it a federally recognized ICFMR?
Chair Gelser, the 17-and-a-half-year-old is, and I will say that in the context of the other discussion, just since I'm here and I will answer this, that is one of the ones that we're actively looking on for residential placement for back in Oregon.
And do you know, Fair Boards, the manual, one of the things that's really interesting, it's updated April 2019, and it appears that child welfare workers are trained to the idea that intellectual disability is known as mental retardation and that is a personality disorder. Why is that in the handbook?
I cannot answer that question because I don't know the exact reference that you're making. We'll find out the answer to that, Senator Gelser, and get back to you. I do not believe that child welfare staff are trained in that way. Again, we're working very closely with Lilia and her staff. Part of my job in this agency is to connect the various services that we have and connect them together. We have been operating as 5 separate programs within the Department of Human Services, and within the past year and a half, we've been building bridges so that actually those points of connections can occur, and Marilyn and Lilia are working much closer together than previous directors, and this will show itself in the months to come. I know that we have work to do, but that is one of the tasks that I have, and it's not just with ODDS, it is also with self-sufficiency. And I don't know if this committee has any interest in finding that out, but actually one of the main elements of fixing and helping the child welfare systems is to provide self-sufficiency services. And that actually extends to all of the programs, including ODDS, VR, and APD. So that's what we're working on. And I don't think that our vision is any different than yours. I don't think where we want to go is any different than where you want to go. And we'll be glad to work with you and members of this committee to get us to where we need to be.
I have another question, but does anybody else have a question? Another child with an intellectual and developmental disability was placed at the Illinois Academy on August 27th. That child is 9 years old now. Not sure how old that child was when they were placed on August 27th. That's been 7 months and 27 days. You still have no contract for a face-to-face provider, so that child has had no face-to-face contact with a contracted provider based on your contracts or your invoices. How do you protect an intellectually disabled 9-year-old child sent thousands of miles away in a locked facility with nobody assigned near that child to have safe eyes on them?
Chair Gelser, members of the committee, I don't have the specific information on that child. When Sarah Fox comes up, she may have information as to whether we have or don't have a contract face-to-face or what the plan is for that child. Again, we'll get you that information and provide that to you.
And I would just expect as the director that you would know which of your kids have not had face-to-face visits. I mean, we have all of the contracts, we have all of the invoices going back to prior to this child being placed. We have all of the, unless you've not sent data, we have all of the data and there is nothing there. It would demonstrate that there has been no visit to this 9-year-old child placed with an intellectual disability in a locked, segregated facility in Illinois outside all of Oregon culture, practice, and promise for 7 months and 27 days. We learned last week that the other 9-year-old was being injected and orally medicated to be sedated, which is, so how do we know that's not happening to this child?
Senator Gelser, members of the committee, it's not appropriate for me to talk about specific children. And as the director of this agency, I'm responsible for 5 different programs and 9,000 staff. I have seen the spreadsheet. I currently don't have it in front of me and cannot refer to it. I do have a child welfare director, and I have professionals in this organization that pay close attention to these things, and they'd be glad to provide you the information that you need.
Who was paying close attention to the 9-year-old in Montana? Why did it take 24 days from the day you learned she was being injected before anybody went there?
I'm not going to talk about the specific child, Senator Gelser. I've already told you that it's not appropriate for me. I know that in the hearing a couple of weeks ago, that was done. It's your prerogative to do that. We as an agency do not do that.
All right, well, I believe every single child matters, and it's our responsibility to hold you accountable to keep these children safe. The fact that we, in 3 weeks, have learned about 2 9-year-old children left completely unattended in other states is incredibly concerning, and the inability to provide information about that when the timeline for the hearing, the information that's been requested has been put out there is important, and it speaks to what I'm concerned is a lack of urgency around the safety and dignity of these kids, and that is incredibly disappointing.
Senator Gelser, I am as concerned as you are about every one of these children, and I do not take this kindly to be accused of not paying attention to children. And I will ask you to please not use these as, if you want to help us improve this system, then come walk along us. These should not be public shaming sessions. This should be learning sessions. If you want to work with us, Senator, I worked for 9 years in juvenile correctional facilities. And what I learned through that process is that when you continue to shame and blame children, as well as adults, they become defensive and they do not react in the way that actually healthy for the system. This type of interaction is not helpful to our children. It's not helpful to our staff. It has really dire consequences. I can tell you that I will do everything in my power, and we will and I cannot actually sit here and agree that what you're telling me is accurate. You're making some assumptions. We'll provide you all the information, and we will have, I can guarantee you from what we have already learned from the children that we have visited, they're safe, they're receiving the services that's actually appropriate for their development. And if you want, again, if any members of this committee want to sit with us, I'm not going to talk about the specific children in a public hearing, but we will share with you individually about every single child, why those decisions were made, how those decisions were made. The staff that we have, the people who are making these decisions are extremely caring people. No one wants to put the safety of the children at risk. I did not come to this agency to basically put children at harm, and I do not appreciate being accused of that. I'm doing all in my power to help fix this thing, and I'm asking you to help me.
And Fair Boards, I would be happy to help you. However, I am more interested in walking alongside the children who are being hidden, who are far away, who have absolutely no one to speak for them. I received a letter this weekend from another family that had a child at Acadia, Montana. Their child was put in a straitjacket and was injected so many times that they could not keep track of it. Nobody is speaking for these children, and I'm happy to walk along the agency, but everybody has a line, and my line is when we are sending 9-year-olds away with no assistance, no oversight, and we're drugging them. That to me is a problem. That is not shaming. However, I feel shame that that is happening to our children. And I am less interested in what that feels like for the agency and more interested in how we fix it. And weeks later, to not be able to answer the questions, to not be able to know where we have kids, that is a significant problem. We don't know who this child is. We just know the age, we know where. That is what we have to happen. The fact is, if we had not been asking you for those face-to-face contracts, it took weeks to find them. You should just be able to pull them down. You should know who you have contracts with. You should know when they're coming in. You should know when you have expired contracts. You should know when you don't have contracts. That is information that you did not have.
Senator Gelser, members of the committee, all of that information exists within the agency. Getting it is not so easy. The fact that it took us a while to get those contracts did not mean that those contracts did not exist. Yes, of course, the children are always the focus, but who serves the child? It is the staff that serves the child. Who writes the policies? It's the staff that helps write the policies. And through these hearings, if you're getting the agency to a point that we cannot attract talent, that the staff actually do not want to work for the agency because they do not like to be accused of harming children, then it actually will have adverse consequences. Pulling single examples of what happened to one child at one event in one facility does not make the entire system liable for not caring about children. Every one of our staff cares deeply about the children that we serve. I can bring the staff here at the next hearing because I know we have these meetings scheduled weekly. Those staff who actually have gone to these facilities and have spoken face-to-face with these children, and they can tell you about their interactions, not identifying the specific child, but I have a sense of pride for the agency that I'm leading, and the staff, we do make mistakes. Absolutely, we make mistakes. But these things could be managed in a different manner. And I'm just challenging you and asking you to please give us some grace and work with us so that we can fix this agency.
And we have been doing that for 5 years, Fair Boards.
Madam Chair, I would like to request a brief recess.
Yes. Thank you for that brief break. I went to find the Senate President to invite him. He and I have been discussing these hearings and how to move forward. And good, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Gelser, I'm just going to make a statement here that I am, Senator Hurd, in particular for you and Senator Montesantis not here, and to the witnesses and the people in the room. I guess I'm somewhat responsible for this whole thing, to say the least, because I did see a program regarding foster children out of state, and it got to me. It really did. And I have always relied on this committee and Senator Gelser to, you know, look, take care of the children. I've said that to her, even like, you know, at times when she was here, you got to get back on the field because you care about the kids, as everybody in this room does. So, I mean, and I just want you to understand that. So if you're upset, you can be upset with me. And I told her I would support her and help her in any way I can. And this committee, as you remember, Senate Bill 1, et cetera. And I mean that, because these are the most vulnerable of all children, and I mean it. So I wish the adults, that would be, so be mad at me. Blame Peter, blame the beside. Don't blame anybody else if you're mad. I did tell her straight up, Sarah, you got to take care of the kids. Somebody's got to take care of these kids. Now, I didn't, you know what I'm saying? So I guess I'm somewhat responsible, to say the least, for what's going on here. But I must tell you, I was just talking about this to the Senate Republican leader. This foster care things, what do we do? How do we deal with it? I literally been talking with him. And just moments ago when we met with him. So I'm not trying to bring Herman Bertschicker into this, but we found ourselves with the Senate Democratic leader and myself, what are we going to do about foster care? Because we knew Sarah was working very, very hard, extra hard on this. So, you know, we got to get this right. We do. And I realize you got the executive branch, legislative branch, and it's not our job to supervise the executive branch. That's it. But we can't just not do things when we hear things or information comes to us. Now, I don't know if you think I'm just BSing you. I'm not. I'm pretty direct about this, and I'm pretty vulnerable when it comes to children. I don't know why. It's just a thing. And I worry about the children that are, well, first of all, the parents aren't there. We wouldn't be talking about this. So how are they going to be treated, the most vulnerable? So I don't know if you want me to say anything more, but I do want to make it clear that I had told Sarah Gelser in no uncertain terms, you got to help us make this thing right. So, you know, Senator Sara Gelser, I said it on the Senate Bill 1, I have been in the legislature probably too long, a lot of people think, but I don't know of a child advocate who's done more, cares more. So, but I'm the guy you want to dislike. I'm the guy, Dallas, if you're upset, that you want to dislike. And I don't mean to exclude you, but I have basically said, you got to get this thing right. And she knows that. And she didn't need for me to say that, but I wanted her to know that I fully support her. And I do today. And I'm doing it here in front of this committee meeting. I don't think I've ever done anything like this before, ever. But I mean every word I say. These children, you all have, I don't have to tell you. So Senator Gelser, you know, I support you. I am sorry we're having this juggernaut thing is happening, because remember my saying, the only thing wrong with kids are adults. And this can happen here and beyond here, and Oregon can lead the nation. And I just think, do you understand what I'm saying? So do I let him have a chance to come at me if he wants to be mad at me, Senator Gelser? It's up to you. So have at me. If you want to have at me right here. Blame Peter.
Senator Courtney, I would never blame you. You have a reputation that is unmatched. And I'll just ask you a question. How would you feel if someone told you you don't care about kids and you're actually hurting kids? How would you feel?
Nobody said that.
Stop, Sarah. Let me just answer this. Okay. Your Honor, you know, that's been said to me before. And it has been said to me before. And I've always found if a person is asking me that, then they're telling me they care profoundly about children themselves. And they need to know that I probably can match them in their feelings. And somehow the individual hasn't seen enough of me or understands enough of me or given me enough benefit of the doubt. That's a phrase I love to use, that I wish would use. Hasn't given me enough of the benefit of the doubt to say, say something like that. So that is my best answer. You'll think I'm being fuzzy, but I'm not, because that has been said to me before. Not by you, but others have said that to me, and a host of other issues. We just had there's a certain bill up, we just discussed it, that where people saying, you don't really care about children. That was said to me almost in the last 2 or 3 hours, in a way. And I just said, I looked at them, because they were being driven by the fact that they care, and I don't, because of the way I was being. But the mere fact we were here, I don't know how this building cares about children. This is a building that makes public policy. You know that. That is the job of these legislators. They have to make public policy. So, I don't know. I've answered the question as best I can.
Thank you, Senator Courtney. I think that our goal and outcomes that we want is the same. This has never been about me. If it was about me, I would have walked into this job. But there is a way to fix the system, and there is a way to actually compromise it more. I never doubt Senator Gelser's intentions. She cares about children more than anyone does. But I do not believe the current process is going to bring this agency to a place where it can actually create better outcomes for children. My goal and my role is dual. One is to deal with the fire that perhaps is burning right now in the Oregon foster care system, and it's actually being exacerbated and made bigger by the media and by some of the proceedings that's taking place here. But a lot of it is real and needs to be addressed immediately. There's also a longer-term plan, meaning how can we together put a system in place so that you don't have 5 directors in the course of 2 years, so that we don't have the same problems raising their head again year after year. That's why I'm here, and that's what I want to do. Really, why you're here is because I am not mad at Senator Gelser. Senator Gelser made a series of accusations about the agency's work that I could not answer, primarily because I don't have the answer to those. I have people sitting in the back of the room that have the answer to those, and most of what she communicated was inaccurate. From my perspective, when you stress an agency to the point that people who are watching this public hearing today, do you really think that we can attract talent to an agency to go through this process? Do you think that we can keep good caseworkers in an agency to go through this process? I put my life on the line to serve and save the children of the state, and I know you will as well, and I know Senator Gelser does that well. My issue is about process. It's not about who cares and who doesn't care. I have the utmost respect for all of you, but going through this process and having these public hearings in the way that is being had, hitting me with questions that I've never heard before. If someone through social media notifies you that a kid has been put in a straitjacket, I have no knowledge about that. So it's not fair to be asking me, putting me on the spot on this. And again, it's not about me. But this reflects on the agency. This basically communicates the message that the agency is incompetent, that it cannot care for children. And I will tell you that with all of the fixes that we need to make, every day there are people in this agency that are breaking their back, that are working overtime to get to where you want to get to where you want to get to, and the members of this committee want to get to. If I'm not the right person to do this job, then it's a pretty simple fix. But I'm committed. I'm committed to do whatever I can to move this agency forward. I'm just asking for your help.
Sir, let me make something very clear to you. I have every faith that you and your agency and this committee will make it happen. You know why? I always deal in bottom lines. I'm 75, an old guy. I always go with my bottom line, and the bottom line is everything he kept saying, the kids. Lord knows Senator Sara Gelser said it's the kids. That is why I know you're going to find a way, working with this committee working with you to make it happen. I really do believe that. I know you've made a very strong statement, etc. I've made statements that are strong here too. But I got to tell you, you kept coming back to the kids. I cannot have a conversation with Senator Sara Gelser that kids don't come into it. Regardless, my kids, all kinds. Mm-hmm. And everything you said kids, kids, kids. Well, that's it. And they're the most vulnerable kids. That's where you dedicate your life. That's who she's dedicated her life to. So I have every faith it's going to happen. I mean it. I know this is not a fun time. Things have been said. I get it. But I got to tell you, I believe
Thank you,
this
Senator.
committee has to be seen as your partner. It has to be, and I know legislators can drive, it has to. Senator Sara Gelser has to be seen as your partner in this. And you know, and Senator Gelser and I have had our disagreements in life, you should know. We really have. Come on. And here I am. I told her, I believe in her to help us get through this thing for the Oregon kids. I've said that to her, and I mean it. I didn't just say it to her. And I put on this, every person I put on this committee is that kind of person. I'm telling you.
Thank you, Senator.
So I just have to say, if any of the information was inaccurate, that would be unfortunate because it's all information that you sent to me. There were not accusations that were, it's my turn now. There were not accusations that were made. There were statements with dates and numbers. I did not ask you about the straitjacket. I informed you that I received that email. I never said you don't care about the children. I did say somebody has to be accountable because even if people don't want children to be hurt, they are being hurt. And we cannot continue to dismiss it as 10 mistakes or 20 mistakes or 30 mistakes that don't matter. They do to those kids. And in this discussion, it keeps coming back to the adults. This is not about the adults. This is about these children. I'm going to adjourn the hearing. I understand that it is uncomfortable, but I am very sad that I have lost confidence in the agency. I don't share the same confidence that you have, Mr. President. I don't. I have wanted to have confidence and trust in the agency, but I have lost it. And that is really hard because I have worked for DHS. I believe in the mission of DHS. I want the agency to be successful. But when information is inaccurate in terms of what is given, when it is withheld, when we are run through circles of agreements that get pulled back, and then when we find out these very real stories about children, and it comes back to how does it feel for the adults at DHS, that makes me worry that we have really lost our way. Because whether it's that 9-year-old, whether it's the 19-year-old that sat here in our last hearing and told us about what she experienced, whether it is Elsana who sat at the pre-meeting a couple of weeks ago, that is whose lives are being changed. It's not that they feel bad on a day because they went to a hearing or there was a bad newspaper article. Their lives are profoundly different. I spent part of my day talking to a girl that was at Give Us This Day. I met her after Give Us This Day. She was assaulted there. She was locked out. She was denied adequate food. She was forced to shoplift for tampons. She was separated from her brother. She was bounced around from place to place. She is now a mother. She's trying to get a housing voucher, and DHS told her that they're getting too many applications, so they're just going to put them off for several more weeks. She put hers in a month ago. She's going to lose her housing and lose her baby. That's another baby in foster care. That is very frustrating. I know that nobody wants that to happen, but while all these meetings are happening, all these other things are happening, real life goes on for these kids. They don't get their childhoods back. If you're a kid that has been in a locked, faraway place for 33 months, like some Oregon kid has, and again, it's a specific kid, but we don't know who it is. Every kid is a specific kid. Every single kid in the system is a specific kid, and we don't talk about them enough. We make it about everything else. It has to be about them. That is what this is about for me. It's not about you. It's not about Maryland. It is about having accurate information, but it's about how do we get these kids home? How do we stay true to values for the issue of the IDD and the ICFMRs? You sat with the people that were forcibly sterilized. I mean, that is a big rollback to put those kids
Can we
there.
have the opportunity to answer the allegations that you made, Senator? Can I bring people to the table to answer the questions that you put to me? Can I do that?
Sure.
I'll ask Marilyn and Sarah Fox to come up.
Do you need to go first?
What's that?
Do you need to go to your PERS meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. You're welcome to stay. I just don't want to keep you longer. That was nice of you to come.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me.
Good afternoon, Chair Gelser, Co-Chair, Vice Chair Hurd, and committee members. My name is Marilyn Jones, and I'm the Director of Child Welfare.
Good afternoon, Senator Gelser, Chair Gelser, Vice Chair Hurd, members of the committee. My name is Sara and I am the Treatment Services Program Manager for Child Welfare.
Sara, would you please respond to some of the, again, we're not talking about kids with names, but there were certain issues raised about kids being put in a straitjacket, that we do not have a face-to-face contract with one of our children, that the child has been there for a long period of time with no visits. Can you please address those?
Sure. I've asked, during the hearing, I've asked for confirmation about the practice of any type of use of straitjacket, which is outrageous and should never be employed for any of our children. So that call is happening currently to give us feedback in this hearing, hopefully. Regarding the third-party contractors, I can confirm that there is not a third-party contractor set for the placement in Illinois. That is the only program that does not have a third-party contractor in place currently for the programs that we contract with for current placements of youth out of state. And it then falls to the caseworker to go and visit. And I know that a supervisor from Lincoln County visited in February for the 2 children that are placed in the program in Illinois. And there is another scheduled visit by a caseworker for May 1st for those 2 children as well.
So to clarify, though, between August and now, that child, 9-year-old with an intellectual disability, has been visited 1 time.
That is my understanding.
Only 1 time.
That is my understanding.
And it was not inaccurate that there is no third-party contractor, no face-to-face.
There is no
true.
third-party contractor for our Illinois program.
Confirming that. Mm-hmm. And I will, on the straitjacket piece, that was another family with a child at Acadia, Montana. That is not an Oregon child. The point is, what are the other things that are happening in these facilities, not just to our children, but that our children are seeing and that we may or may not know are happening to our children based on what they feel comfortable and confident telling us if somebody comes to see them.
Yes, and I can confirm that the other, I think I mentioned this already, the other contracted programs all have third-party contracts visiting on a regular basis. We do have that information. I believe the third-party contracts were shared with the committee.
So Senator Gelser, really, this is what I am referring to. Yes, we do not have a third-party contract for 1 child. We do have it
2
for 83 other children. So again, this is about the public shaming that I'm talking about. This is about this conversation could be had with me, with us in a different setting so that this tension does not occur. This is what I'm trying to convey to you. If you want to help us fix this agency, we are identifying these things and we're dealing with it. If you'd like to hear how to face-to-face meetings with the children are going, what we're doing to put things in place, what we're doing to fix these things, we'd be glad to share those things with you. Again, it's about the process. It's not about the intent.
And for me, Fair Boards, it's about the child. The issue is our task is oversight and accountability. We make promises when we remove children from their families. Mm-hmm. And the idea of, in the course of a couple of weeks, 2 9-year-olds that spent a long time in these facilities without having a face-to-face contract to visit them, that's accurate. I mean, that's what we know happened at Montana Acadia. We know that's Northern Illinois, and there are actually 2 children at Northern Illinois, not just 1. Are the contracts, the expired contracts for Rolling Hills in Oklahoma and for the Indiana programs, are those being reissued since those expired a while ago?
Oh, I know that they've been, the children placed in those programs have been seen on a regular basis, so I will look into understand what's going on with those amendments. They should be coming through, but I don't want to confirm that until I double check. I'll find that out. Indiana. Mm-hmm.
and I think that contractor is Maurice, and then the Oklahoma contractor is Lighthouse.
I know that Maurice is planning to visit tomorrow, so I'm sure that those contracts are still in effect if he's still visiting our children, but I'll make sure.
Senator, would you like to hear how the face-to-face contacts have been going?
Of course.
Sure.
Senator Gelser, Vice Chair Hurd, and committee members, we deployed a team of 4 to go to Arkansas, Oklahoma, in Illinois, Indiana. Last weekend, they left on Sunday and started visiting children. They visited 7 children, and we also had a worker at the Montana site where we started this discussion that stayed with the child until the child was moved back to Oregon. I'll start with that. The facility was gone through. They saw all of the places where the children eat. They talked about their outside activities. They discussed what they did, how they felt. They did a full assessment of their medical records, talking to the doctors, the therapists, and the nurse staff, as well as the staff. And then they interviewed the children privately. There were no concerns about the facility or the medical treatment that these children were receiving. We did, however, find a safe place, hospital placement for the child that was in Montana is now back in Oregon. This child has been struggling since the return. The move has been hard, but they continue to work with this child until we can get her restabilized in a new facility. They visited the other facilities. One of those children is the 17-and-a-half-year-old that you speak of. The children are doing well. They are on target for their case plans. There are treatment plans that happen within 30 days of these children going into placements, and there are treatment, although if a worker is not there, the worker is on the phone talking to the therapist, the caseworkers there, the third-party contractors as well. Each month, if not sometimes, we have some workers that have been contacting some of the children that we went and saw once a week by phone. So they had some concerns about contact with our workers, with our staff. That was the biggest concern that was risen in all of the facilities they went to visit. They did not have any concerns about the facilities themselves or the care or the assessments that were done on the children. They also are doing an assessment of each child through a contract right now from CoMagine, so that we can, and we've asked them to start looking at the kids that are in the Acadia programs that we've already gone to visit. So these kids are actually doing pretty well. And they are meeting and working on their treatment plans, and several of them are about ready to come back home. They've been working with their families. One gets to go home to their families. Another one will be able to step down into treatment. So we will start working on plans for those kids. The one thing I do want to say is I don't want to move a child just to move a child. I want to make sure that the child is receiving the care that they need, that we do have our third-party contracts up and running, that we have somebody looking at those kids every 30 days, and that we do have caseworkers that are going to visit those kids as well. Those are some of the things that we've made sure that we've put in place. We have trackers so that we can know whether it's a third party that's visiting this child at 30 days or if it's the caseworker. We're asking that the caseworkers are going as well as the third party from now on to make sure that we have both eyes on from our agency as well as the third party contractors.
And that would be the draft protocol change around the caseworker visits would be a minimum of once every 90 days the caseworker would go and visit in addition to the third-party contract on a monthly basis.
Correct.
I just received feedback that Acadia has not used straitjackets, does not use straitjackets, and they would be willing to submit a letter on letterhead to make that statement clear about their practices.
So when a child talks about a hold, The holds are usually a hold that is a physical hold. It is viewed by a physician, usually a nurse and a therapist. The same with when we talk about the IM injections. With a child that gets an IM injection, it has to be ordered by a physician, and it has to be viewed by a physician why it's given to the child. So it is done by a medical staff, and I think that that's important as well for you to know.
Do you think it's appropriate for a child to get an intramuscular injection for chemical restraint?
Senator Gelser, Co-Chair Hurd, and committee members, I am not aware that it is used as a physical restraint. I do know in cases where children have trouble self-regulating, we're talking about most often Benadryl, which helps the child be able to help themselves regulate without a large dose of medicine. I am not a physician, nor do I protest to be a physician. What I do know is that my staff looked at all medical records. We have staff from OHA now joining us, and they are also doing an assessment of the medications that our children are receiving and making sure that they're the right doses and they're used for the right reasons.
I also want to clarify that actually that practice has stopped. We have sent letters to all of those facilities. This is basically a retrospective look as what had happened.
Yes.
What about oral chemical restraint? I mean, I think the injection is, but I also did not hear you say that you think it's inappropriate to intramuscularly inject a child to manage their behavior.
Chair Gelser, Co-Chair Hurd, and members of the committee, I am not a physician. I am not in the medical field. And this is when we rely on highly trained professionals to make those decisions for what's in the best interest of the child. We do not believe in intramuscular injections for our kids. However, again, I am not a physician. We've asked them to stop. They have ceased and desisted, and we're going to move on from there.
And orally? Oral chemical restraint for behavior?
I can't address that, Senator Gelser, because I don't know that we are using oral restraint on, unless I am viewing those myself, the medical records myself. I would have to talk to the physician, and it would have to be deemed by each child, about each child, and why they are using that medication.
Because I think in the discussion that we had the other week, that PRN was for, it was by mouth if she would take it, and intramuscularly if she wouldn't. So same impact on the body, except for the injection. So I guess the request is, you sent a request, and I saw the letter that said no more intramuscular injections. That's just one form of chemically restraining a child. The same impact on the body and the behavior comes orally. Are you willing to issue a letter to all of these facilities saying that, consistent with Oregon practice, Oregon children should not be chemically restrained?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So my question is, under what circumstances has this taken place? What kind of behavior is the child exercising to have this kind of treatment with the Benadryl or whatnot?
Sure. Chair Gelser, just to address yours, I believe my understanding is the PRN, oral PRNs, a common practice in the state of Oregon. But I would feel more comfortable with OHA speaking to that that component, because I also do not have the expertise in that area. And then I apologize, Senator Hurd, can you ask your question one more time?
Okay. Whether it was the injection or oral through the Benadryl, essentially, is what I'm hearing is the common.
I apologize. I recalled it after I asked. So, thank you for your question. My understanding in general terms is that these types of restraints or responses occur when a child is trying to harm themselves, harm another individual, another peer, or themselves, and an intervention, an emergency critical intervention is needed to ensure safety.
Follow up. So if we ceased to use even the oral medication of Benadryl for those types of cases, what is the alternative for stopping a child from harming themselves, harming others?
best practice and evidence-based models always begin with prevention in the beginning and a response to observation of escalating behaviors. But once they've reached the point of a critical incident and there's no ability to intervene ahead of time any longer, there are a variety of approaches that can be used. And in these programs, my understanding is that can range from verbal de-escalation, body blocking, so to speak, to ensure that the child can't injure other children or themselves, and if necessary, a physical intervention to provide a safe and approved hold or physical intervention to ensure their safety as well.
Thank you.
Any other as far as what's planned?
Senator Gelser, Choke, Co-Chair Hurd, and committee members, I also wanted to talk to you about a concern that was brought up around 25 deaths, I believe, is what was brought forth, that there were 25 deaths in the facility where we had our children. We went ahead, and this was one of the facilities that we saw last week. There are actually 23 deaths. It is in a hospital that specializes in medically fragile adults over 55 years old. They were ill and they died of natural causes in this geriatric unit. Most of them, I think I said, were 55 years or older. They are on the same campus as one of our facilities, but they are not connected to the facility.
So regarding the visits, I'm just going to skip to two slides here that I'm hoping just to provide a quick overview about the two types of visits that are taking place currently. We have facility safety reviews. I should say not child welfare, but DHS has requested a children's care licensing program to review facility safety at the Acadia programs this week. They're currently there in Arkansas as today. So 2 of the 5 programs will have been reviewed by licensing by end of the day today, and by the end of the week, all of the Acadia programs will be reviewed by our licensing unit here, and we'll take into consideration the differences of the state and Oregon's licensing standards in the state of which the program resides. So they will join central office staff and Oregon Health Authority in site visits beginning next week as well. And as Marilyn mentioned earlier, we've had 8 youth visits have been completed by central office staff since April 14th. And those visits took place in the Acadia programs and the Northwest Children's Home in Idaho. And as she mentioned, the youth report that they are doing well. The staff there have provided treatment plans and context to show that they're working toward their treatment goals, and those types of things we've already covered. Also, caseworkers are seeing youth. We had 3 caseworkers visiting Red Rock Canyon this last weekend for Parents Weekend, for example. And as Marilyn mentioned, we have a tracking document to ensure we capture all of these visits. Previously, we were capturing third-party visits, and we hadn't captured caseworker visits in one centralized location, and now that will be occurring, and hopefully we can provide that tracker to everyone here shortly, a redacted version. So next week, the youth visit team and the program safety review team will be joining together to visit the 4 programs that we contract with in Utah. They're sequel programs. We will be having an Oregon Health Authority Behavioral Health Services staff, staff from the licensing unit, staff from treatment services unit, a child welfare nurse consultant, and DHS child welfare permanency consultant and field service specialists will go as a group starting April 30th to visit the 41 youth that are placed in Utah. And what we're hoping to gather in the course of these reviews is a licensing report which evaluates the conditions of the facility in relation to licensing standards of Oregon. Oregon Health Authority will provide a comparison of programmatic approach to Oregon state and federal standards for inpatient psychiatric treatment for persons under the age of 21. Treatment Services will conduct a contract review and demonstrating the level of contract compliance, including any required action plans needed, and any findings will have a timeline of completion for a 120-day period if there's an action item required for the contract review. Documentation of youth interviews, including questions asked and responses received for each youth. And then we will, at the end of each of these site visits, and once we receive the information back from the parties, we'll make a determination related to ongoing contracting with each of these providers. So we did a little bit of a split response to the Acadia programs just to try to respond as quickly as possible. But starting next week, the group will be going together to the sequel programs, and we also will be visiting Iowa the week of May 13th, and we have a few others yet to schedule, but over the course of the next, I'm hoping that the youth interviews, the youth visits will be completed within 45 days, and the program visits, which consist of a smaller team, some of those individuals, one individual will need to go to all of the programs and can't be shared among a group, will be completed by the end of June.
And how many of those are unannounced, where the facility doesn't know that you're coming?
So far, we haven't done any unannounced. They've been announced at pretty short notice for the Acadia programs. We let them know potentially the day before that we were coming, and it was on a Sunday night, so there wasn't a lot of time for them to prepare. However, they were told before the team went out.
Senator Gelser, Co-Chair Hurd, the other thing that happened was our staff got stuck in Dallas, Texas, and so they ended up not showing up where they were supposed to show up. So in respect, they actually had to drive to Oklahoma, and they started their tour there, so they were unexpected when they arrived there.
And Senator Gelser, Vice Chair Hurd, and members of the committee, I actually have spoken personally to the central office staff who visited with these children, and they're available if you would like them to come and either talk to you personally or in front of this committee and share, again, not youth specific, but generally what they saw, what they experienced. So far, as we have dealt with this, there are not big red flags and big concerns that are coming up. Kids have case plans. That case plan is being followed. Again, there is an assigned physician that deals with the medical, behavioral, and psychiatric needs of the children. So that does not mean that we're not going to see concerns as we move on with these visits. But so far, things have looked fairly positive. And again, all of these children are on a path and a plan to ultimately be out of these facilities. And then, there's a future slide, but we are working very closely with Oregon Health Authority. We are working also engaging the coordinated care organizations so that the placement in Oregon can be found for these children to transition back. And so over the course of the next few months, we do have a 60-day plan in place, and we will report back to you. And as these placements become available, specifically, the focus right now is on the IDD kids. As Lilia shared with you, there are 2 of those children that we are hoping that there are actually placement for them in Oregon, and we will work as quick as we can to address the needs of the others. I did just want to also say that some of the kids who also qualify for IDD services have co-occurring disorders. Some may have mental health issues. Some may have some other issues. So some of those issues are also being addressed as part of the treatment plan.
Is there a commitment moving forward to not put IDD kids in either ICFMRs or segregated programs that only serve individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities?
Absolutely, Senator Gelser. I can commit to you that we will not do that. And frankly, again, as we are speaking with this tone, I can tell you that part of the challenge has been when these kids were sent to these programs, the knowledge level did not exist in child welfare around what the IDD requirements were. And again, that's partly these programs have been operating separately from one another. I don't think intentionally, and Sara can speak to this, any of the IDD kids and in the facility that you're referring to were placed there with the knowledge that we were violating something, or I know about Fairview, I know about all that stuff, I know about the commitment that we have made as a state, and it is my priority to make sure that that doesn't happen, and I can tell you that that will not happen because these programs are working much closer together.
And with that, we are out of time. So thank you very much, and we're adjourned.